Have you ever had the experience of trying to ignore something? Maybe it's fear, sadness or anger, only for it to seem like it gets stronger and stronger. No matter how much you try to push it down, it keeps bubbling back up, louder and louder. Well, you're not alone. You see, we've all done it. It's like when we're trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The more that you push it down, the more forcefully it pops back up when you finally lose control. Welcome back to my channel, and today's topic is one I know we can all relate to: avoiding our emotions. Specifically as well, how the more we avoid an emotion, the more we actually create it. Sounds counterintuitive, right? But stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll see just how true this really is. We're going to explore why avoiding emotions only makes them more intense, what causes emotional buildup, and how we can begin to allow our emotions instead of running from them. And most importantly, I'm going to show you how healing and allowing your emotions can almost create a kind of magic in your life. When you start this process, you'll see doors open that perhaps you didn't even know were closed. So by the end of this video, you'll have practical tools to start allowing and healing emotions instead of letting them fester and create chaos in your life. And stay until the end, where I do have a bonus tip for you as well. So let's start with the big question. Why do we avoid emotions in the first place? It usually boils down to one thing: discomfort. As human beings, we're wired to avoid discomfort, whether it's physical or emotional. And let's face it, feeling emotions like sadness, anger, fear, or even shame can be really, really uncomfortable. Think about the last time you felt one of those intense emotions. What did you do? Did you sit with it and allow yourself to fully feel it? Or did you distract yourself, telling yourself, oh, I'll deal with that later, it'll go away? Most of us choose the latter. Let me give you a personal example. A few years ago, I went through a really difficult time. I was overwhelmed with emotions, fear about the future, anger at things I couldn't control, and sadness about some of the relationships in my life that were changing. And instead of facing those emotions, what did I do? I threw myself into work, keeping busy to avoid feeling. I'd tell myself, if I stay productive, I won't have to deal with how I feel. But here's the thing, those emotions didn't go anywhere. In fact, they got worse. They showed up in different ways. Sometimes I'd snap at people for no reason, or I'd feel anxious without knowing why. Eventually, I had no choice but to face those feelings head on. And that's the thing with emotions. They demand to be felt. If we ignore them, they don't just disappear. Like a child trying to get your attention, if they don't get it, they don't disappear. It's the same with our emotions. They don't just go away, they get louder. As just like that, our emotions grow when they're ignored. They wait for the right moment to resurface, and sometimes in ways that are much more painful than if we just allowed ourselves to feel them in the first place. There are also societal reasons why we avoid emotions. Think about the messages perhaps that you've received throughout your life about emotions. Maybe growing up you were told, don't cry, or toughen up, or stop being so emotional, stop being so sensitive. We're often taught that emotions are a sign of weakness, and this conditioning makes us think that we need to suppress or control how we feel in order to appear strong. And that's especially true in certain environments, like the workplace, for example. In many professional settings, showing emotion is seen as a vulnerability or even a flaw. So what do? We mask our feelings, we push them down because we don't want to be seen as weak or incapable. But here's the irony. Avoiding emotions actually makes us weaker in the long run. When we suppress how we feel, those emotions build up, creating stress, anxiety, and tension. Over time, this takes a toll on our mental health, our physical health. You see, chronic avoidance can even lead to burnout and relationship issues and an overall feeling of being disconnected from ourselves and others. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. And in essence, a bit surprising. When we avoid an emotion, it doesn't just build up and wait to be released. It actually comes back stronger, a little bit like a boomerang. And that's why I like to call this the emotional boomerang effect. So let me explain how this works. When you suppress or avoid an emotion, like anger, sadness, or fear, you think you've gotten rid of it. You might even feel a level of relief, thinking, oh, I dodged that one. But in reality, that emotion is just biding its time, waiting for an opportunity to return. And when it does come back, it doesn't come back in the same form. It actually comes back amplified. So it's like this. Imagine you're angry with someone, but instead of dealing with that anger, you push it down. Maybe you distract yourself by scrolling through your phone or watching TV or burying yourself at work. But at first it seems like you've avoided the anger. But the next time something, and often it's a lot smaller, happens, maybe that same person forgets to return your call, or you stub your toe, or what happens is the anger comes flooding back, much bigger than before. Suddenly you're not just angry about the original situation, but now you're furious and it feels like it's out of proportion to what just happened. That's the emotional boomerang effect. The more you avoid an emotion, the more forcefully it's going to return. The emotion bounces back stronger than before, demanding to be felt. And this happens because emotions are energy, and energy needs an outlet. When we refuse to give it that outlet, it doesn't disappear. It gets stored in our bodies and in our minds and in our subconscious. Eventually, that stored energy has to go somewhere. And when it does, it can feel overwhelming and even uncontrollable. So here's a personal story, if you like. I used to avoid conflict like the plague. Whenever I'd get upset or angry, especially in relationships, I'd bottle it up. I'd tell myself, I don't want to make a big deal out of this, or I'll just let it go. But in reality, I wasn't letting it go. I was avoiding the uncomfortable feelings of anger and frustration. And guess what? That anger didn't just fade away. It would come back later, often over something really small and petty, like a minor disagreement or a simple misunderstanding. And when it did come back, it felt 10 times more intense than it ever should have done. This is how the emotional boomerang works. It takes the original emotion and almost throws it back at us, often in unexpected and exaggerated ways. So now that we've talked about why we avoid emotions and how they boomerang back to us, let's dive deeper into something really, really important. So what causes emotional buildup in the first place? Because if we want to stop avoiding our emotions, we need to understand why they accumulate in the first place. The first one is suppression. Over time, the most common cause of emotional buildup is suppression. Every time you feel an emotion but don't allow yourself to express it, you're suppressing it. Over time, those suppressed emotions add up and they don't just go away, like I've said, because you've ignored them. So think of it like trying to ignore physical pain. If you hurt your foot but never treated it, you could keep limping along, but eventually that untreated pain would cause even bigger issues. The same thing happens with emotions. Suppressing them might work for a little while. Oh, that feels better. But eventually they'll demand your attention, sometimes in ways that are much more painful. Another huge cause of emotional buildup is the fear of vulnerability. In many cases, we avoid emotions because we fear what will happen if we let ourselves feel them. Will we break down? Will we look weak? Will other people judge us? Vulnerability is scary, no doubt, but it's also the key to emotional healing. When we avoid vulnerability, we actually deny ourselves the opportunity to heal. Emotions need to be felt to be processed, and processing them is how we begin to release their hold on us. Sometimes emotional buildup happens because we're simply not aware of our emotions. We've become so used to pushing them down that we don't even realise they're there anymore. This leads almost to emotional numbness, where we go through our day feeling fine, but without any real emotional highs or lows. But those suppressed emotions are still there, bubbling under the surface, waiting for a moment to make themselves known. Have you ever had the experience of crying for no apparent reason? You weren't even sure why the tears were flowing, but they just came. That's emotional buildup, finally finding an outlet. And when that happens, it can feel overwhelming. Some emotional buildup can also stem from unresolved past experiences. Maybe it's something traumatic that happened in your past that you perhaps never fully processed. Maybe it's a loss that you never grieved. Or maybe it's a difficult relationship that left you with emotional scars. These unresolved experiences don't just fade away with time, they linger. And if we don't take the time to process and heal them, they create emotional baggage that we end up carrying around with us, sometimes for years. And then the final way that emotional buildup can happen is when we don't have healthy ways to express ourselves. Whether it's talking to a trusted friend, journaling, or even finding creative outlets, having ways to release emotions is essential. You see, without these, the pressure inside keeps growing and growing and growing, and eventually it has to come out. So how do we allow and heal our emotions? And this is where we get into the good part. How do we break the cycle of avoidance and start feeling better, more in control, and more connected to ourselves? The first step to allowing your emotions is simple, but not always easy. We acknowledge the emotion. You see, you can't heal what you don't acknowledge. Just recognizing that you're feeling something is a huge step toward healing. This isn't about labeling the emotion as good or bad. It's about being present with what's happening inside you. When you feel an emotion rising up, whether it's anger, sadness, frustration, or something else, give yourself permission to feel it. Don't judge it. Don't try to push it away. Just allow yourself to feel it fully, without resistance. Give yourself full permission to feel the emotion. Yes, it can be uncomfortable. Yes, it can hurt. But remember, emotions are like waves. They come, they rise, and then they pass. When you allow yourself to feel them fully, they actually lose their power over you. You realize that you can survive the feeling and it doesn't have to control you. One thing that can help with this is actually naming the emotion. For example, you might say to yourself, I'm feeling angry right now, or I'm feeling really sad. When you name the emotion, it takes away some of its power. It helps you step into almost an observer role where you're noticing your emotions without being overwhelmed by them. It's also important to ask yourself, what is this emotion trying to teach me? You see, every emotion, even the uncomfortable ones, carries a message. Anger might be showing you where your boundaries were crossed. Sadness might be telling you something needs to be grieved. When you understand the message behind the emotion, you can begin to heal. You see, healing is about integration. It's about allowing the emotion, learning from it, and releasing it in a healthy way. The more you practice this, the less hold these emotions will have over you. So when you feel an emotion coming up, instead of pushing it down or distracting yourself, just let it flow. It might feel uncomfortable at first, but the more you practice this, the easier it becomes. And what you'll find is that when you allow your emotions to flow through you, they don't stick around anywhere near as long as they would if you tried to suppress them. And then also practice self-compassion. As you begin to allow your emotions, it's important to be kind to yourself. You're human, and feeling emotions is part of the human experience. One way to practice self-compassion is through positive self-talk. Instead of criticizing yourself for feeling a certain way, try saying things like, it's okay to feel this way. or I'm doing the best I can. You might even place a hand over your heart and take a few deep breaths, reminding yourself that you deserve kindness and understanding just as much as anybody else. And as I promised at the beginning, the bonus tip, don't be afraid to seek support. You see, allowing and healing emotions can be difficult and uncomfortable, especially if you've been avoiding them for a long time. You don't have to do it alone. Talking to a trusted friend, a family, a coach, a mentor, any of those kinds of people can make a huge difference. You see, sometimes just expressing how you feel to another person can be incredibly healing. It helps you realise the emotions you've been holding on to and gives you a sense of connection and understanding. And there you have it. Avoiding emotions doesn't make them go away. It makes them stronger. But by acknowledging, allowing and healing our emotions, we can break the cycle of avoidance and create real, lasting changes in our lives. Remember, your emotions are a part of you. They're not something to be feared or avoided. They're here to guide you, to teach you, and to help you to grow. So the next time you feel an emotion rising up, don't run from it. Allow it, heal it, and watch the magic happen. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more content like this, and leave a comment below sharing your experience with allowing and healing your emotions. I'd love to hear from you, and I do respond to every comment. And if you know somebody that you think would benefit from this video, please do feel free to share. So until next time, keep creating a life you love living.